Questions? All right, so now we have 8 groups, apparently, because one of the groups had to be broken up. Um, okay, let me know if you have any questions about that. Moving along, how was your weekend? Anything fun? No? Where's home again? Yeah, yeah. Wow, okay. How was that? Okay. All right, awesome. Okay, so last week we talked about cognitive development, right? We talked about how the brain structure is formed during infancy, toddlerhood, right? Here we're talking about from birth to 2 years of age. Now we're moving along to social emotional, right? Social emotional. Why is this such an important factor for our development as young adults? Well, we can sort of hypothesize that what has happened to us as child in our early stages, such as childhood and infancy, has yielded the results of how you behave now, right? In several different areas. Who here finds that they are trusting individuals, that you generally trust people and give them the benefit of the doubt until proven otherwise? Who here finds that they're kind of skeptical or don't really trust people until they're proven that they should be trusted? Why do you think that is? Where does that come from? Being let down? People let you. Same thing? Being let down? Same thing? Ooh, somebody raised their hand. Okay, right. And so let down early on in life. What about who came into this classroom at the beginning of the semester feeling confident, like it's going to be nothing. I'm going to learn the stuff. I feel eager, I feel motivated, and I'll be successful. Who here felt that way? Who here felt like, oh man, I don't know nothing about like deep psychology things, development, and I don't know, it's 50-50. Who here felt like it was 50-50 that they'll be successful? Anyone? All right, thank you. You wouldn't admit it anyway in the first place, right? So this is kind of the early parts. There's other things we're talking about here because we say, well, people who are not socially and emotionally developed will have issues as an adult because they would be considered anti-social. Like, what does anti-social mean? It means you don't have a healthy, normal, we're just saying healthy and normal response to others. You can't communicate, you don't follow rules. There are no rules in your mind. There are no others in your mind. Who cares about others? Why would you care? It's about you, right? You won't be able to communicate. You won't be able to have a relationship, keep a relationship. And relationships are everything. You have a relationship at work with your boss, your relationship with your family. Hey, do you hate your parents? Do you love your parents? Do you help and assist people? Your relationship with your community? Do you care about your community at all? Do you do anything? Right. All healthy. Because if not, then we say, well, what kind of person are you? Are you an isolated person who doesn't really have friends? Right? You're like, well, how come we don't have friends? Right? We generally learn from each other. This is how we gain intelligence through interacting with other human beings because we're social animals. So some people may be isolated. Who here is feels that they're more isolationists? Like they more prefer to be alone. More prefer to be alone. Do you get anxiety around too many people? What about who here are the introverts again? Right? And then we could correlate introversion, like, well, introversion, much prefer you keep your energy in more isolated environments as opposed to social environments. Like, where did that come from? Why do social environments drain you of energy to some degree? Who here are the extroverts? right? Who here is an introvert, extrovert? You're like, that really depends on the context of the situation, right? You're like, well, sometimes I am, sometimes not, if it calls for it. And you're like, well, how did it all this come to be? We're going to try to understand, discuss it from infancy, right? Really, it deals with your caregivers. Were you picked up as a baby and coddled when you cried? Were you just left to cry? Where you sat down in an environment, people displayed toys for you to play with, or you just kind of left alone with nothing. Left alone with nothing, you got to kind of use everything with yourself in order to sort of create some sort of experience to learn, right? That shapes your life. So here we're trying to understand, we're starting off with Erikson. Remember at the first chapter, we say, well, there's a bunch of theories. Jean Piaget got his theories. Sigmund Freud has his psychosexual theories. Erik Erikson has his sort of humanistic theories. So he says it's different. What does humanistic be? Or what does humanistic mean? Well, in the field of psychology, it means really how you develop based on social interactions to become a totally fulfilled human being. And as we saw maybe that one time when I showed Maslow's hierarchies, we saw that pyramid. At the base level, we need food, water, shelter. Above that, we need security, right? Above that, we need, bless you. Above that, we need some sort of self-fulfillment, right? And above that, we have self-actualization and all of that. Some sort of things bigger than yourself kind of take hold. So here we're talking about just the basics. So we're starting at the pyramid, we'll work our way up. Food, water, shelter, okay, great, but what are these sort of social emotional needs? We'll watch the video that I told you about the rhesus monkeys with Harry Harlow, who was a psychologist. And he did experiments with the rhesus monkeys to talk about social emotional needs and dependency, right? And attachment. So we're going to talk a lot here about dependency, attachment, and autonomy, right? All right, so we say, hey, we start off with developmental tasks. Developmental tasks are crises in life. We will all have crises at different stages in life, right? You may be going through a crisis now, which means that you're going through challenges, and there can always be some challenges. But for the infants, for the toddlers, the challenges are really moderating emotional behaviors, right? Moderating your emotions. Do you smile when people smile at you? Do you respond in sort of what we would consider to be a natural, healthy way? Do you have no response? Hey, a child doesn't respond even up to 2 years of age if you smile. That might lead to some issues, right? That means you don't have an actual natural human response in terms of emotions of smiling, because smiling tends to be a universal reaction across all cultures, regardless of time and space. So you have crises that you have to address, right? Here we're talking emotions. Here we're talking about interactions with people, relationship buildings, trust, right? Trust. Autonomy, well, trust versus mistrust. And we said trust is, can I depend on you? And if I can depend on you, then it takes away anxiety because I know what to expect. As human beings, we like to move through life with expectations. Remember, our minds are pre-wired to try to predict the next moment. We try to plan. That's what kind of separates us from other animals. Human beings are planners. They could plan for 20 years. Other insects, mammals, other mammals, they don't plan as deeply as we do. So we say, hey, it's built on trust. Planning is built on trust. Can I depend on people? What can I expect? Or mistrust. Hey, the world is full of evil people. People are bad. You can't trust people uh, as far as you could throw them, right? You're like, well, how does that shape your emotional life? How does that shape your achievement and goals? How does it change your behavior? We're talking about autonomy versus shame and doubt, right? Autonomy is confidence. Are you confident? And were you raised in an environment where that was fostered, right? Where mom and dad sort of praised you, hey, you can do it, right? Go ahead, you can do it. Or you're like, hey, don't do that. That's bad. You're doing a bad thing constantly. And thus you will have the shame and doubt component, which we'll talk about a little bit more, right? Which means you're kind of uncertain, you're skeptical about your own self if you're able to do something, right? If you're able to do something, even beyond what you know about something. All right, so we start with trusted caregivers. We say this is important because this is about attachment and dependency, right? And we say healthy. Nothing should be too extreme on either side. Mom should not be mom or dad, right? Let's just use them for example of caregivers. They can always be someone else. Mom or dad should not be overbearing. If mom and dad are overbearing towards responding to your needs, right? Coddling you too much when you cry, then you say, hey, you may grow up very dependent on that response, that reaction from your environment. And you're like, life's tough. You're not going to get that response. So now you have this sort of gap that's going to cause you anxiety because you're expecting yourself to always be coddled too much. On the flip side, yeah, mom and dad just let you cry. They don't really respond to you when you are in distress as an infant or toddler. They don't give you what you are asking for that you're communicating with, right? And you say now you're going to have an unhealthy imbalance of uh, on the opposite side. You're not going to expect anyone to save you. You're not going to expect anyone to respond to you. You're going to expect anyone to sort of support you. You're like, well, that's kind of good in a way. You're like, that might build up great autonomy. But unfortunately, we work in groups. When you get your first jobs, you're going to put you in a group. And you're like, I don't work well with groups. Why? I'm too self reliant. I'm so independent that I actually think that I can achieve all of it. You're like, well, the world doesn't necessarily work that way. You'll find yourself in a prickle as you become older, right? And so that itself becomes an issue. So you say that's unhealthy too. Remember, we say balance is the key. Balance. You say this is life, right? And it's always going to be the yin and the yang. Right? So we say we're always striving here. Maybe good as well too, but those are extremes, right? Or we say a distribution table, right? We're saying here. This is the sweet life, right? The sweet spot. Usually a sweet spot. We say, hey, all things in moderation and balance, which we would define as healthy. We're like, oh, you're normal and you're healthy in some way. Okay, facial expressions, right? So infants at the age of 2 begin to smile, right? We're uncertain if they're smiling as a response to us smiling, but by the age of 4 months, 2 months, I was referring to before, age of 4 months, they will have a reactive smile, which means that mom or dad or whoever can smile in front of them, and they begin to respond and react. We say, well, that's healthy, right? We want those type of expressions. By age 6 months, infants are able to kind of laugh on their own in order to entertain themselves, right? Entertain themselves, which is good. We say, well, that's the beginning of imagination, creativity, and the ability to not have people around in order to foster some sort of stimulus or excitement. Right? Communication barriers. Right? We say, well, a lot of things can happen at this time that could prevent parents from communicating with their children in many ways, right? Lifestyles, things of that nature. And those can also lead to issues with reactions and healthy responses. So we say social smile is important because if I smile, you will tend to smile too if I was directed at you. That's healthy. That means that we have the same sort of equilibrium in terms of communication. We You have given me a sign that I can trust you, that there's something friendly about you. And this is necessary and healthy for my own sort of evolution and adaptation through the environment. Negative emotions, anger, frustration, crying, right? And so maybe we meet people and like they cry about everything. They are so sensitive, right? They're like, oh, even if you're not being mean to them or anything, like, well, what's up with that, right? Maybe you can argue there's some hormone irregulation of some sort, but here it may be attributed to how they were raised. They may be imitating their parents. They're like, hey, I had a mom who cried about everything. She was angry about everything. A father who was very angry. He was an alcoholic or something of the sort, right? What we do is we begin to imitate the emotions. We look at how they respond on an everyday basis, and we begin to model the behavior, right? Use them as a representation on how we will emotionally respond to different experiences. Right? So negative emotions. Also, we think of, hey, negative thoughts attributed to this as well, too, because that sort of experience as an infant will begin to form negative thoughts, which we will call kind of like neurotic behavior, that you just tend to be a negative thinker. You're like, why do people think negative? Well, they think negative because they can't lose thinking negative, right? It's a way of self-soothing. Because now you think, well, if anything happens positive, this is wonderful, but I didn't expect it. I expect usually things to be negative, so that I could be comforted in my own thinking. Throughout my own life, I can feel okay knowing that things will go bad, right? And so you're like, well, positive thinkers, on the other hand, says it doesn't matter, right? It's going to work out good from my perspective, even if there's negative reactions or responses, right? Even if people are liars, deceivers, manipulators, it doesn't stop me from looking at the world as a positive place, because that has effects on my own well-being and how I move through life. So think of these. We're looking to get rid of distress. We're constantly looking to soothe ourselves, even with our thoughts. So people who think negative are soothing themselves, reducing the anxiety of the expectancy that something will happen. So they just think negative. So that is like giving themselves a self hug in some way, right? And they model this behavior by the parents. Remember, we said social emotional needs first. The money's good. Don't get me wrong, right? The money is good. The fame is good. What do you want to be? A Twitch superstar, YouTuber, right? A musician, an actor, actress. Great, right? What you will find is that later in life, there's just things that don't satisfy you long term, right? And these things, because we say they don't necessarily give us the social emotional needs that we truly need, that starts from the beginning. So we say if anything happened here is at the beginning of life, throughout the rest of our life, the physical material things won't matter, because we will have a dark void from our caregivers, our parents, not giving it. All right, with that being said, we'll watch. Actually, you know what? I had a couple questions for you as groups. And then we'll watch Harry Harlow's rhesus monkey experiment on social emotional needs. All right, here's my first question as group. So, how would you advise new parents who wish to help their infants develop trust? What are some sort of advice you would give parents? What sort of interactions should they do? Environmental things should they do? What things can they do to create behaviors that uh, give a sense of trust to infants? All right, talk amongst your groups for a couple minutes. Then I have another question. All right, so I'm saying trust promoting activities. What kind of activities promote trust? Okay. Yeah, so think of maybe your own experiences, right? You have parents, I'm sure, in some way, shape, or form. So, how have you been fostered to trust? What sort of activities have your parents gave you to trust the world? And if not, think of things that haven't been done, right? They give you a sense of mistrust as well. Okay, let's see what we got. What do you think over here? Boards? Oh, rewards. Oh, like being promised something and it doesn't happen, right? You're like, yeah, absolutely. You're like, hey, I'm gonna get you that train set, right? And you're eager to have that train set, and it never show up. What is the result of that? The result is like, next time I shouldn't depend on you to mean what you say, right? Your words begin to mean less to me because your actions don't follow the words. Anything else back there? Okay. Next group here, I guess. Right here, what did you think? Yeah. All right. We say, hey, attentiveness. Why is it so important for trust? Yeah. Attentiveness is support, right? It's like you care, you value, right? Support, or you value that person to even give them attention, right? In the back, anything you think of? Yeah. Like, hey, I can count I can count on you being there physically, right? So I know that I feel coddled in comfort in some way, knowing that there's an adult, my caregiver, in the environment, and the ability to provide play environment. What about over here? Yeah, we say security. Right? Nothing matters unless you feel safe, right? If not, then you're going to be extremely stressed out, wondering what will happen, which we'll see in the video. What are you thinking of, Matt? Yeah, which kind of goes back to, attention and reward, reinforcement, right? Like, hey, I'm crying and you're actually going to give me food, right? Or coddle me. Okay, good. Let's take a look. Well, before I show the video, here's my question to you as individuals. For those of you who, your own rearing, how do you feel in terms of autonomy that you've been fostered to be independent people? And if you're not independent, if you're honest with yourself and you think like, hey, I'm a little bit more dependent on people, what in your rearing has caused you to be more dependent? I'll give you a couple minutes to talk about that. All right, so we're talking about being dependent or autonomous. Are you able to rely on yourself mostly, or are you super dependent on other people, even besides your parents? All right, because that goes along with attachment. We say, hey, I'm clingy. I depend on people too much. I can't help myself. Okay, who was brave enough to talk in honesty? Let's see. What were you thinking over here? Independence, autonomy. What things in your environment fostered that or did not foster that? Yeah, so you say, hey, you know what? My role, I was given a specific role, maybe even at a very young age, to be able to support others. So being able to support others, you need to be counted on, just like your parent. So almost given a role of a parent. You're like, that's a pretty big shoes to fill. Probably help you out later in life. Because not only can you take care of yourself, you actually can take care of other people, right? Which is good. What about here? For all the very independent or dependent people. What fostered that in your environment or your rearing? You just feel like it's partially genetic in some way? All right. What do you think? Okay. So it's maybe structure, like you got brothers and sisters or something. Okay. What do you think? Too independent? Like you don't work well with groups? You don't work well with others? A preference for self. Is it the same here? You work well in groups, but you have a preference to work by yourself. Okay. In the back, what are your thoughts? Interesting that you mentioned you grew up in the city. So does that matter? Does those who are raised in rural, out in Plano, those who are raised in the suburbs, River Forest, and those who are raised in the urban city environment, does that have an impact on autonomy or independence? You're saying here it mattered, right? You say, why does it matter? Ooh, more tasks to navigate. You had more things to figure out that are probably a little bit more challenging. You have more problems, really, right? You're like, hey, when we said safety and security, if I grew up by the farm, it's pretty secure, probably. If I grew up in River Forest, I don't think I have to worry about walking down the street. But if I grew up in such and such horrible neighborhood in the city of Chicago, every day I walked outside, I had to navigate something, right? And even as a child, you notice that your parents may have had those same sort of experiences. So we say environment matters. It's giving you more challenges, connected more neurons in terms of crises. You've had more crises, right? Speaking for myself, I went to 13 elementary schools, right? More challenges, more crises. Times where we were homeless, living at the bus station, train stations, born and raised in Cabrini Green Housing Project. Like, whoa, it was challenging. It was a lot of crisis. Dad, and we had to go stay with dad. Dad, mafia member, Italian mobster guy. So I'm looking at new challenges, survival, crime, violence, stuff like that. And so in my mind, it was too much, right? And maybe that's say like the most messed up people become psychologists. We have such an intimate knowledge. But it's also led me to be able to be very cultured. I mean, I dealt with so many different types of people during the experience that it just comes easy and natural for me to interact with anybody around the world. So like those were negative experiences, but they ended up being very positive. I wouldn't have been an international type of person had I not grown through that. So we can turn negative things into positive if we have what we'll talk about later called resilience. Not everybody has resilience, right? Okay, over here, what were we thinking? What foster your either dependent or independent nature? Yeah, think about that. We just say, hey, do you depend on the caregivers or do the caregivers depend on you? So there's people where like we depend on both, but these people also depend on me for our own survival because we have a challenge bigger than most, which is we're immigrants, right? Trying to figure out the new culture, perfect the language, all of that and above. In the back, anything you want to add? So you, okay, so you're the only child? Okay, so we say, yeah, hey, sometimes people are the only child, and Any challenges there too socially? Have people ever expressed things? Don't like selfishness or only care about self or any of those things or no? Okay, which is good, but that tends to be a feature of a lot of um, children who are by themselves. All right, let's look at Harlow's study on dependency of monkeys. Remember, we said, hey, at the beginning, this is where it all starts, right? Because we're forming those neurons, those pathways to make connections, to make sense of the world in terms of what we can expect and predict, right? In terms of creating fear. I don't know what to expect, so I'm frightened. I am so stressful. There's new people in the classroom. What would the professor think about me? I'm frightened. Other people like, no, this is cool. Who cares, right? I like to talk to people. I look forward to talking to them. I want to see all the new challenges. So let's look at how these happen with rhesus monkeys here.
Now here are 106's two mothers. As you can see, it was weaned on a wire mother. Here's baby 106. Watch. He's going to the wire mother. Got to eat to live. Oh, he's going back. He's back on the pot mother, and he'll stay on the pot mother. Actually, this baby spends 17 to 18 hours a day on the pot mother, less than 1 hour a day on the wire mother. We had predicted that the variable of contact comfort would be a variable of measurable importance, but we were unprepared to find that it completely overwhelmed and overshadowed all other variables, including those of nursing.
Frankly, Doctor, if it comes to a choice between wire and cloth, it's reasonable to expect that any child will go to the cloth. It's a matter of creature comfort, like a baby with its blanket. But is this really love?
Well, what do you mean by saying that a baby loves its mother? Certainly one thing we mean is that it gets a great feeling of security in the presence of the mother. Now, Mr. Collingwood, wouldn't you say that if you frightened a baby, that it went running to its mother, was comforted, and then all the fear disappeared and was replaced by a complete sense of security, that baby loved its mother? Now, in this experiment, this is the apparatus we use.
It looks diabolical.
That's just the way the baby monkey feels about it. Flashing eyes, loud sound, moving mechanical parts, all of these things are designed to frighten a monkey. Now here we have a peaceful, resting baby monkey. Let's find out what his reactions to his mother are when we frighten him.
He's scared, all right.
And he does what any child will do in a similar situation.
He runs away.
It's more than running away. He was running to his mother, to touch her, to drive away his fear. Contact with the mother changes his entire personality. Look, now he's actually threatening the diabolical object. All right. This gives us part of the picture of the strength of infantile love. This is a 6-foot square room with a few toys and other objects. But to the monkey, it's much more menacing. We know that when our own children are taken to a strange place without their mothers, they are often overwhelmed with fear. This room room is just such a new and strange environment for the baby monkeys. No mother is in there. Now, let's put a monkey into the room. Notice how cautiously he enters the room. He's searching for comfort, but nothing relieves his disturbance. Now we'll take the baby monkey out and put in a wire mother.
Now, this one was nursed by a wire mother.
That's right, all his life.
She doesn't seem to help much.
Now we'll try the same test with a cloth mother in the room. You see the contrast in the behavior? Despite the fact that the wire mother nursed him, she could offer this infant nothing in the way of affection or security. But here the monkey, by rubbing against the cloth mother, as if he were seeking as much contact comfort as he could get, builds up his reservoir of affection and security. First, his body relaxes as the fear disappears. But above and beyond this, new positive response patterns appear. He now goes out to explore and investigate this new, strange world. He is now a normal, happy, curious baby.
Okay, what were your main takeaways from that before we get out of here? Key takeaways from that video. We all need security, right? Think if we said we're all self-soothing. You're tapping your feet because your unconscious mind wants to soothe itself. Touching your face, looking at your phone, self-soothe, right? Constantly, just like the baby would constantly go back to the cloth situation, whatever that was. Right? Because we say, hey, this fear and anxiety is an energy. Energy can't be created nor destroyed. It can only be transferred. And so it needs to be transferred to something very comforting, soothing, such as our mothers, such as our parents. If not, then you will see that you would be skeptical to explore the environment. It would take you longer than if you were raised in a healthy environment with a cloth mother, let's just say. Right? It would take you much longer to get adjusted, acclimated, comfort in new situations, new people, new classroom, new environments, new challenges, whatever, that you essentially will regress or fail in sort of comparison to your counterparts, right? Which shows that some people get further in life just based on these early stages of rearing. Okay, that's it for today. I'll see you on Wednesday. Have a good one.